the capture of Duterte will not end there. We will run after the other culprits. It was not difficult to discern how, why, and even should we establish this program. Let me be open and honest that I did voted for the butcher. I did voted for the mass murderer named Rodrigo Duterte. But I will never and even stop saying that I regretted that decision. The church perhaps is partly at fault as well. We failed to campaign thoroughly who this person is, or we failed to campaign against this person. This is where the church perhaps is lacking, that when it comes to difficulty or sensitive issues, we remain quiet. We talk about 2016 to 2022, how much noise did the church proclaim and protested against the killing? One congressman would be telling us, I miss the church. I miss the time when the church was so active in going out in the streets to protest the filing of the Reproductive Bill Act. There were nuns, priests, bishops marching in the streets to protect that one tiny cell of life, the sanctity and sacredness of life embedded in that moment of conception. The congressman goes on, but what happened and what happens when this cell, when this egg becomes a full-grown man? When is able to love and is innocent yet being butchered by the hundreds each day. Where is the church? Where are the priests? Where are the nuns? Where are the bishops? From day one, there was silence. And if there's something that Rodrigo Duterte was successful at, the campaign of fear. It was encompassing. But not all. Not all are silenced. Not all were silenced. Not all were cowed by fear. There were shepherds who stood up. I felt inspired by their call, by their courage, and by their compassion. For that, and coming from the experience of Arnold Janssen Kalinga Center, I felt the need that a dignified, systematic, and a holistic program should be offered to the widows and orphans left behind. Perhaps just to adjoin with that, those who were killed were mainly breadwinners. You would have a list on my left side, the one that I showed, the Senate and the Congress. The list of all people who were killed under our care, around 327 of them. All of them are breadwinners, bringing food to the table for their families. If you kill them, if you take them away, this is where the family would end up, in the streets. It is like the program was designed to complement one another through God's divine hand. As to why the church was silenced, perhaps the church also was afraid. Rodrigo threw several threats against the church. I know a lot of your trashes. I know a lot of your skeletons. I know priests who are married, and I would expose them. Empty threats from a man who also has an empty heart. The shepherds who came out, you could mention no less than Father Picardal, who from the Redemptories, who was the first to bring out the documents about Duterte's killing spree in Davao, alongside with Father Bert Alejo. SJ, you have Robert Reyes as one who also protested against the issue. You have now the Cardinal, then Bishop Ambo, who was the bishop of the ground zero of the carnage in Caloocan. You have Bishop Pabilio, you have Bishop Soc, Archbishop Soc Villegas, who sympathized greatly. And perhaps there are other priests who came out and stood to denounce and to protest. Of course, the CBCP was there, but as a whole, as in a span of 6 years, it would be good, it would be nice to document how many church pronouncements were there, how many official statements were recorded, compared to the daily curses of Rodrigo Duterte. I think we would be greatly outnumbered. Evil triumphed greatly during those 6 years, the most tragic time of our history, if not next to the old Marcos Sr. Just like Kalinga Center that follows a system of care, the system of healing begins with me vetting each beneficiary. I didn't know where to look for them. I had to join underground meetings where they would present one, or the organizers would present one or two victims wearing veil for confidentiality. And I remember in one of the meetings handing a handkerchief and a piece of paper with a note, "If you need help, please call me." I received a call after 2 weeks. And I vetted their stories, but more importantly, I vetted their needs. There were top 3 needs. The financial need for the funeral, which would range from 35 to 75,000 pesos. Imagine a family who barely earns $10 or 200 pesos or 250 a day being charged with 35 to 75,000 pesos for a funeral service. That is exploitation, which is not also being investigated by the authorities this very day. The cohorts, the funeral services where the police are also part of the syndicate. After vetting, we moved to, the first thing that they need would be financial need, and then the daily sustenance. But more importantly, I realized that the trauma that possessed them was something that needs to be addressed. So with that, we created a psycho-spiritual intervention, a program that lasted for 7 to 12 Saturdays. I was handling it myself at the beginning, but when the group was growing and with Kalinga still at its youth, I had to seek assistance from competent counselors and psychologists. But that's the second part, and that's the core competency of paghilom. Healing is addressed and provided through the competent hands of compassionate, courageous, and caring hands. To date, we have 21 batches, 327 families and growing and counting. In between the psycho-spiritual interventions, we placed the legal assistance The legal assistance is also something sacred because it speaks about the truth of how they experienced and witnessed how their loved ones were killed. This serves as an affidavit for them. And this sacred story, which becomes a legal document, is something that contradicts and stands against the police report that were forced on the families as to the circumstances of how their loved ones were killed. In the police report, you would see at least 3 elements. The number of drugs that was planted, the kind of caliber used, because they claim that they fought back. Third, how the person fought back against the policeman. It would sometimes, rarely does it say the number of gunshots sustained by the individual. So the legal documentation is something also sacred. And then the fourth, the fifth would be education assistance and livelihood assistance. The sixth would be when we were growing into 80 and 100, I felt the need to identify leaders from their ranks and provide competency training for its sustainability. And then very recently in 2022, even it was the time of the pandemic, we went out in the cemeteries in order to exhume and save the cadavers that were threatened to be thrown into the common graves. That is what we now know as Project Arise. We exhume, we do the autopsy through our good friend Dr. Raquel Fortun. We cremate and turn over the urns to the families in order for them to mourn, and then we lay them to rest in the first EGK Memorial Columbarium known as Dambana ng Paghilom, where their urns and the families could visit both for healing and a perpetual resting place for the loved ones. In the handing over, one cannot help but wonder, why do they grab it immediately? Why do they just take it even while it's being handed slowly? And afterwards, they would just be caressing it like no other. It took me days to ponder and understand until I realized that there is such an expression of deep craving for an embrace, because during the wakes, and this I experienced it myself, there was no time for an embrace because there was the threat of the killers still roaming around. You cannot, and they say this to the family, you cannot have a long wake. You cannot, and we will not allow you to get more sympathy than what you have now. There was this trauma, meaning to say their loved ones were taken away. The police withheld them from entering the scene because of reasons we don't know, but later we found out that's where they tamper with the crime scene. That's when they place the guns, the shabu, and whatever needs to be planted on. So the trauma forbade them to express their loved one, their love for their loved ones. So it's only during the turnover of urns and when they bring home these urns Are they able to express their grief, their sorrow, and even their love for their beloved deceased? The reason perhaps why I'm here and that fervor to stand beside victims of the EGK families is they have been branded as drug addicts. And in my short experience of doing drugs of 15 years, short lang, no? I did cold turkey, of course, through spiritual direction, through counseling. I was able to find solace, consolation, and even redemption, thus giving and able to hold on to the conclusion that drug addicts are people who need care, counseling, and even mental guidance. That means they should not be dealt with by force, by punitive means, and more so, you do not blast their brains off. Obviously, Rodrigo Duterte created a narrative for the people and the population to buy. Everybody hates drugs. No one in his right sense of mind would say that I agree to substance abuse. Of course not. But he created this narrative himself that he is angry at drugs and he will pursue the war on drugs. But if we look at it in the larger picture, who were the victims? These are the victims. These are the victims. The policemen were the victims. The triggermen were the victims. It was not the rich. It was not the powerful. You go to Davao now, it's a seedbed of laboratories. And the Chinese, whom he welcomed greatly, they brought in the drugs. I know from my sources until today that drugs were the cheapest, at its cheapest, during the time of Duterte. So, when Duterte says that I hate drugs, he lies. When he said that I will create a war on drugs, that's great. That's a great BS. That is a very evil, that's the most evil thing that a person could ever accomplish. To hide behind a narrative only to legitimate your hold to power. My story has been an open book since even before my ordination in 2006. But it was something that I was never proud of. I was never in the limelight. I never brought it out in the open. However, when this dubious and evil campaign of Duterte that drug addicts should be killed, that drug addicts should be eliminated, or the technical term that they used would be silence or neutralize, that for me was very frightening because you're giving authority to someone to end life, wherein life by itself can be mended. That life that is broken and wounded can still be fixed. So it simply created a culture, it added to the culture of violence and death. It gave authority to people, both the barangay and the police, to identify who lives and who dies. And for me, until today, we will be struggling with such a culture. Today, the trigger men, the killers are still at large. And I know that they have become more enterprising. There might be the confidential funds of the vice president has been squashed. So the killers would need to also sustain their forms of living. And intelligence has pointed out that they have offered themselves as gun for hire. So the culture that he created and started simply by saying that drug addicts should die created a far evil culture than from his pronouncement that drug addicts should die. It was a very ill, poor advice. But as I said, the mind of Duterte is a mind of a cultic in nature. The person of Duterte, if I may, as I have discovered and studied him, could even be an epitome of evil. A person who curses God, a person who ridicules the church to its core, a person who wishes ill and death to any person with deliberate function and cravings. I don't think that is ever natural. That for me is evil by its very nature. It was a feeling of redemption. It was a feeling of great joy, to the point that though it was Lent, it allowed us and gave us the license to sing Alleluia. It was a marvelous feeling of Easter, even for a fraction of a time. And that goes as well with the widows. Ang sabi, one was saying, totoong may Diyos, Father. Totoong hindi natutulog ang Diyos. Truly there is a God. Truly, He never sleeps. He hears the cry of the poor. My message to our dear families victimized by Duterte's war on drugs would be simply hold on. Hold on to our truth. Hold on to one another. And just as what we always say, nawalan man ako ng isa, nakasumpong at nakakilala naman ako ng bagong pamilya. I might have lost one loved one, but I did discover a new family, and that is in Program Paghilom. And know that the capture of Duterte will not end there. We will run after the other culprits. Building a house is made and drawn by the architect. But for the house to be completed, you have to have a carpenter, a mason, a painter, an electrician, all this to create a house. We are close in apprehending all those people who build that bloody house known as war on drugs. And in this journey and quest, know that the crucified and the risen Christ is with us.